Okay, I want to start this deep dive with a scenario, and I need you to be honest with me and with yourself. You're at your desk, you're working on something important, maybe a report, a creative project, whatever, and you hit a snag, just a tiny moment of friction where the answer doesn't come immediately. What is the very first thing your hand reaches for?
Oh, the phone. It's almost autonomic at this point.
Right, it's instantaneous. You tap the screen, check a notification, scroll for 30 seconds. It feels harmless. But looking at the source material we have today, that micro moment is, it's actually a symptom of something much bigger.
Totally.
We're living in a culture of immediacy. We're waiting for anything. Answers, food, entertainment. It feels almost like a systemic failure. Like if I have to wait, something must be broken.
Exactly. We've conditioned ourselves to view speed as the ultimate metric of success. Fast is good, slow is bad. End of story.
But today, we are hitting the brakes. We're diving into a source that argues the speed. It's actually wrecking the foundation of everything we're trying to build. We're looking at The Power of Delayed Gratification by Reuben Juma Onunga. And before we get into the details, I have to point out something that just struck me immediately. Onunga isn't a monk. He isn't some life coach. He's an engineer.
And that framing changes the entire conversation. Usually when we talk about patience or waiting, we're getting advice that feels very soft. It's about trusting the universe or finding your center. It's all a bit vague.
It feels like a moral lecture. Be a good person, sit still.
Right. But Onunga doesn't care about vibes.
Hmm.
He cares about load-bearing structures. He approaches personal growth with a systems mindset. He looks at a human life the way an engineer looks at a bridge. How does this structure handle stress? What creates stability? And his central thesis is that waiting isn't just some nice moral virtue. It is a structural requirement. If you don't have it, the thing collapses.
Wow. That is a bold claim. But before we start pouring the concrete here, I need to clear up the definition. Because I'll be honest, when I see a title like The Power of Delayed Gratification, I have a very specific, very negative visceral reaction.
I get it.
I think of dieting. I think of staring at a piece of cake and just being miserable because I can't eat it. It feels like self-punishment.
And that is the biggest hurdle Onunga clears right in the introduction.
Yeah.
He is adamant. Delayed gratification is not deprivation. It is not about making yourself suffer for the sake of suffering. If you're just miserable, you aren't building character, you're just miserable.
So if it's not saying no to fun, what is it?
It's a strategic trade. It's the deliberate decision to postpone a lesser reward right now to secure a significantly greater reward later. He calls it choosing outcomes over urges.
Outcomes over urges. I like that.
Think of it less like a diet and more like an investment strategy. You aren't denying yourself the cake because you hate joy. You're skipping it because you want the sustained energy and the health that comes later. You are trading a cheap, fleeting now for a valuable, permanent later.
Okay, I can get on board with that. It's not moralizing, it's just math. It's calculating the ROI of your actions.
It is math. And the math starts with a very expensive variable. Which brings us to the core conflict he outlines in Chapter 1. Impulse is expensive.
That phrase really stuck with me. Impulse is expensive. We usually think of impulse as spontaneous or fun, or maybe weakness if we're being hard on ourselves, but expensive, that implies a direct cost. Break that down.
Well, it costs you because impulse is a master of disguise. It promises immediate relief. Buy the shoes, you'll feel better. Send the angry text, you'll feel vindicated.
Eat the junk food, you'll feel comforted.
Yeah, and the trick is, you do feel better for about 4 minutes. But Onunga uses this terrifying metaphor. Impulse mortgages tomorrow to satisfy today.
That is heavy and frankly a little scary.
It should be. It's a loan. When you act on impulse, you are taking a high-interest loan out on your future self.
Give me a concrete example of this mortgage, because I think we all do this without even realizing we're signing the paperwork.
Well, the most obvious one is financial. Credit cards. When you use credit to buy something you can't afford right now, you are literally spending money you haven't earned yet. You are consuming your future labor. You are forcing the future you to work to pay for the present you's 5 minutes of dopamine.
You're eating your own future time.
Exactly. But let's go back to that phone scenario you started with. That's an attention mortgage. When you check the notification because you feel that urge, you get the dopamine hit now. But you pay for it by fracturing your concentration. And we know from research it takes, roughly 20 minutes to get back into a deep flow state after an interruption?
Yeah, the switching cost is massive. So a 10-second check literally cost me 20 minutes of future productivity.
That is the interest rate on the mortgage. Onunga's point is that this is a practical, quantifiable loss. He says, What is spent immediately cannot be invested. If you burn your time, money, or emotional energy on the immediate reaction, you have nothing left to compound for the future.
Okay, so we know the cost. The interest rates are predatory. We know we're getting ripped off by our own impulses. So here is my question. Why is it so hard to stop? I mean, I consider myself a rational person. I understand the math. But if you put a donut in front of me at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, or if my phone buzzes, logic just leaves the building.
Don't beat yourself up too much. That isn't a character flaw. That's biology. Onunga covers this in Chapter 2, The Psychology of Waiting. You have to remember that your brain, specifically the older, more primal parts, is wired for survival. And in a survival context, immediate is good. Immediate means safety. Later is risky. Later might not even happen.
Right. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. My brain wants the bird it can see right now.
Exactly. And this mechanism gets even stronger under stress. When you're tired or anxious or overwhelmed, your brain screams for a quick win. It wants certainty. The donut is certain.
Heart health in 20 years is abstract.
Totally abstract. Retirement is a concept. Present me is real and hungry. Future me is a stranger I haven't met yet.
So basically, my brain is sabotaging me because it thinks it's saving me.
In a way, yes. But here's the hopeful part of the engineering perspective. Onunga argues that self-control is not a fixed trait. You aren't born with a set amount of waiting ability like you're born with blue eyes.
So I'm not just bad at waiting. It's not a permanent defect.
No, you're just untrained. He describes waiting as a fruit or a skill. It's a muscle. He makes this fascinating point that even professional investors, people whose entire career is based on long-term thinking, who analyze data for a living, they still feel the panic to sell when the market crashes.
The urge doesn't go away just because you're an expert.
Never. The urge is always there. The difference is the training. The urge weakens with what Onunga calls the repetition of restraint. Every time you say, not yet, you are doing a rep. You're building the structural integrity of that muscle.
I like reframing it from a moral failure to just skipping leg day. It feels more actionable. So let's say we hit the gym, we start training this waiting muscle, we're sweating, we're resisting the phone, the impulse buys. What are we actually building toward? What's the payout?
This is the crossroads Onunga maps out in Chapter 3. The choice between short-term pleasure and long-term power.
Pleasure versus power. That sounds dramatic.
It is dramatic because it dictates the entire trajectory of your life. Let's look at a very standard after-work dilemma. You come home, you're exhausted, your brain is fried. You have a choice. You can collapse on the couch and scroll through social media or binge-watch a show for 3 hours. That is short-term pleasure. It's easy, it's low friction, it numbs the brain.
And frankly, sometimes it feels necessary. I'm not going to lie, I love that version of the evening.
Of course, it offers relief. No one denies that. But let's look at the alternative. Suppose you spend those 3 hours learning a new coding language or writing that book you talk about or working on a side hustle. That creates friction. It's not pleasurable in the moment. It requires effort when you are already tired.
It's work. It's definitely work.
It's work, but over a year. That effort compounds. That friction generates heat, which generates energy. That effort turns into a new career, financial independence, mastery. That is long-term power. The scroller is a consumer of moments. The learner is an architect of the future.
So the trade-off is, do I want to feel good now or do I want to be strong later?
That's the crux of it. And Onunga applies this specifically to the two areas where we feel the most insecurity, money and career. Chapter 4 drops a rule that I honestly think should be printed on every credit card. Money obeys patience.
Money obeys patience. Sounds simple, but unpack that.
We love the story of the windfall. The lottery winner, the crypto millionaire overnight, we obsess over those stories. But Onunga says true wealth, sustainable wealth, is almost always the result of repeated restraint. It's the boring stuff. It's avoiding emotional spending.
Oh, I am so guilty of this. I had a bad day. I deserve this gadget. I'm bored. Let's buy something.
That's using money as a therapy tool. And it's a very expensive therapist. Patience inserts a gap between the emotion and the transaction. He suggests a cooling-off period. If you want it, wait 24 hours. Usually the emotion fades and you keep the cash.
And that cash, if invested, actually grows.
Right. But I think his application to career is even more profound and maybe a bit controversial in our current climate. There's a quote in Chapter 5, "Competence is rented daily, and the rent is patience."
That's a bumper sticker right there. Competence is rented daily.
There is no lump sum payment for skill. You can't just buy expertise. You have to pay the rent every single day with practice, with study, with showing up when it's boring.
This connects to something that I think is really relevant right now, the concept of the silent years.
Yes, this is crucial, especially for anyone trying to build something meaningful.
We live in a world where everyone wants to be visible immediately. Everyone wants to be a founder in their bio or a thought leader on LinkedIn. But Anunga warns against wanting the visibility before you have the ability.
He calls it fragile success.
Yeah.
If you skip the silent years, that period where you are working in obscurity, where no one is clapping, where you're just grinding and learning and making mistakes in private, you don't build the foundation.
You're building a penthouse on a shack.
Exactly. And the first time the wind blows, the first crisis, the first public failure, it all comes down. The silent years are where the roots grow deep. If you try to bypass them because you crave the dopamine of likes and applause, you're setting yourself up for a collapse.
It's tough, though. Working in the dark is lonely. It feels like you aren't making progress because no one is validating you.
It is lonely. But Onunga would say that loneliness is the curing process for the concrete. It's the price of the rent.
Okay, so we've covered money and career, but Onunga goes somewhere else, somewhere that I think is actually harder for most people to manage than their bank accounts. Relationships, emotional discipline.
It's chapter 6 and really challenges a lot of modern advice. We're often told, be authentic, speak your truth, don't bottle it up.
Right. If I'm angry, I should say I'm angry. Otherwise, isn't that suppression? Isn't that unhealthy? If I hold it in, won't I explode later?
Onunga makes a vital distinction here. He distinguishes between feeling and expressing. Emotional discipline is not about not feeling. You are allowed to be furious. You're allowed to be hurt. But you must govern how those feelings are expressed to the world.
Governance versus suppression.
Think about venting. We think venting is good, but often venting is just dumping your immediate raw emotion onto someone else. It feels good to you in the moment. It's that short-term pleasure again, but it can permanently damage the relationship.
You say something in the heat of the moment that you can't take back.
Exactly. Words are like toothpaste. Once they are out, they aren't going back in the tube.
Anunga calls for the power of the pause. It's widening the gap between the trigger and the reaction.
That split second where you decide, am I going to scream or am I going to ask a question?
That's where the power lies. If you can pause, you allow your higher brain to catch up with your amygdala. You allow understanding to replace assumption. And ultimately, trust is built by people who are predictable. If you explode every time something goes wrong, you are emotionally expensive to be around.
Emotionally expensive. Wow, that's a great way to put it. Reliability is just delayed gratification applied to behavior.
100%.
But I have to play devil's advocate here. We've talked about all these areas, money, career, emotions. It sounds exhausting. If I have to white-knuckle my way through every day, fighting every urge, using willpower to not buy the shoes or scream at my boss, I'm going to burn out. I'm going to fail. You absolutely will. If you rely on willpower alone, you will lose. Willpower is a battery. It runs out. By 6 p.m., your decision fatigue sets in, and you will eat the donut.
So what's the fix? How do we do this without going crazy?
This is where Onunga puts his engineer hat back on in Chapter 8. He says, stop relying on willpower and start building systems.
Systems over willpower.
An engineer doesn't hope the bridge stays up. They design it so it has to stay up. You need to design your environment so that the good choice is the path of least resistance and the bad choice has friction.
Give me the specs. How do I engineer my life to do this?
Okay, take saving money. If you have to decide to move money to savings every month, you won't do it. You'll find a reason not to. This system is automation. The money leaves before you even see it. You remove the decision entirely.
Remove the friction of the decision.
Exactly. Or take the phone distraction. If the phone is on your desk, face up, you are using willpower every 30 seconds to not look at it. That drains the battery, the system is. Put the phone in a drawer in the other room.
Now the friction is on the distraction. I have to physically get up and walk to the other room to check it.
And that tiny bit of friction is usually enough to stop the impulse. Your brain says, too much effort, and goes back to work. He mentions work blocks too. Schedule your deep work. Don't wake up and ask, should I work hard today? The schedule already decided. Structure protects discipline.
If you have to fight your environment, the environment always wins.
Always.
So bringing this all together, we're moving from the consumer mindset, I want it now, to the architect mindset. We're paying the rent on our competence during the silent years. We're building systems to protect us from our own biology. But where does this leave us as people?
It leaves us with a new identity. Chapter 10 calls it becoming a long-term thinker. It changes the filter you use for every single decision. You stop asking, what do I feel like doing? And you start asking, what will strengthen my position later?
I really appreciate how he reframes waiting here in the conclusion, because usually waiting feels so passive. It feels like I'm sitting in a dentist's office, helpless, reading an old magazine.
But Onunga says waiting is active. It is aggressive. It is a form of doing. It builds what he calls quiet power. Think about the person in the room during a crisis who isn't rushing, isn't interrupting, isn't desperate for attention. They have a gravity to them. That is the power of delayed gratification. When you aren't a slave to your impulses, you have options, you have stability.
And that leads to the thought we want to leave everyone with today. We talk a lot about freedom in our culture, and usually we think freedom means I can do whatever I want, whenever I want.
But if doing whatever you want just means you are obeying every chemical impulse your brain throws at you, are you free? Or are you just a passenger? Onunga argues that delayed gratification is the ultimate freedom. It protects you from the exhaustion of the rat race. It protects you from that fragile success that crumbles because it wasn't cured properly. It buys you your own life back.
So here is the question for you to chew on today. Look at your life, your wallet, your career, your relationships. Where are you trading your future power for a little bit of present comfort? And what would happen if, just for today, you decided to pay the rent on your competence instead?
It's a trade worth making.
Absolutely. Thanks for diving in with us.
See you next time.